And today you're going to be talking about the fraud analytics and prevention. And Kristen has been with PSCU for how long?
8 years.
8 years. And you are currently the Solutions Consultant Director. And so you can take it away. I didn't prepare for that.
Awesome. Happy Wednesday, everybody. As Christine said, my name's Kristen Gibson. I've been with PSC for 8 years. Before that, I actually worked at what was then First Data, now Fiserv, for about 14. So been in the space longer than I'd like to admit out loud. I had to add it up and it made me cry a little. Can you guys hear me okay and see my screen okay?
Yes. Yep. Everything looks great.
Okay. So as Christine said, we are going to spend, I'm thinking the next 30, 40 minutes here, really introducing the suite of solutions around fraud that come hand in hand with a partnership with PSCU. So gonna introduce all of those, and I think at the end we'll just open it up for whatever Q&A or discussion that folks want to have. So that is the plan for the next 45 minutes or so.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Of course. So I'm actually starting us with the video, and I made my husband test this with me this morning. So you should be able to hear it. It's only about 3 minutes long, but this is Anna, and she's going to walk us through a scenario.
I don't know if there's audio with your video, Kristen, but if there is, it's not coming through.
Probably just some background music so far.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, it is now. Thank you.
Hello, is this Anna Smith?
Oh, wow. I didn't think anyone would answer this late. I received a fraud alert on my phone saying there was suspicious activity on my credit card. I did dispute the charge, but I wanted to make sure you disabled my card, and I wanted to find out exactly what happened. Is my other card safe? I locked it just in case, but I really need it to work tomorrow because I'm on vacation at the beach, and I really need to go to use it.
Yes, I see here our fraud detection system identified activity that didn't fit your usual behavior. Someone attempted to make a purchase in Seattle, Washington for a very large amount, but our system automatically blocked the card. Your debit card, however, has not been affected. I noticed you locked it. You can unlock it at any time, but if you'd like, I can unlock that for you now.
Sure, if it's safe, that would help.
Awesome. Your new credit card will arrive in the mail soon, but I can also issue one digitally to your phone, so you can use it this weekend without interruption. Would you like me to do that?
Oh, yes, that would be great.
I'm issuing you a new card now, which will appear in your app. When you see it there, you will see an option to add it to your mobile wallet.
That's great. Thank you. But I guess I'm going to have to change my card information in all my apps now.
Actually, most of your subscription services like magazines and online streaming services associated with this card will be automatically updated with the new card. Did you know about the alerts feature that is available in your online banking or mobile card management app? You can set your own customized alerts and controls to monitor your transactions.
That's amazing. Thank you for being there.
I see you're a nurse in Florida, and as a thank you to you for being there for all of us, we're adding some reward points you can use on any upcoming purchases.
Thank you. That is so helpful. You really turned my night around.
Thank you for being a member, and have a great time on your vacation.
Well, Anne, I hope she has a fantastic vacation. And I kind of want to just live in the background music of that little video. There was a lot that happened, right, in that 3.5 minutes or so. And everything that you saw there has a touch to a PSCU solution of some kind. What we wanted, the reason I wanted to start with the video today is because I really think it brings us to the heart of why we spend so much time talking and thinking about fraud solutions. And that's Anna, right? That's the member. So enabling a member experience that protects the member and the credit union from fraud, while at the same time keeping that member super engaged with the value that the credit union brings to her, right? That's what drives how PSCU has brought fraud solutions to the table. So we're going to spend some time breaking down some of the fraud specific capabilities that we saw throughout that demo, or through that video, I should say, in the next couple of minutes. So the first thing we saw Anna do was get a notification, right, that she had a suspicious transaction. So when we think about one layer of what PSCU provides in a fraud space, it is card fraud detection and prevention, right? So whenever a card gets used, how are we making sure that it's a good transaction done by the good member, right, and not a bad guy doing a bad transaction? So we staff a team here at PSCU 24/7 by 365. It's a group of fraud analysts, and their job day in and day out is to keep in line with everything that's happening in the card fraud space and tweak the strategies day in and day out. So they're writing global rules for all the credit unions that do business with PSCU. And then they're also writing custom rules that are needed at the credit union level, because each credit union wants to think about fraud typically a little bit uniquely based on your membership and where you are in the country. So they're going to, when I think about the power of card fraud rules, I think there's always two common themes that make them super powerful. So one is the people that write the rules, and PSCU has that 24/7, 365 shop, right? So when a fraud trend spikes on a Sunday morning and all of our businesses are closed, right, our team is still there to be able to make those changes, even when your credit union or the association is not open. The other piece that makes fraud rules work so well is the tool that our folks use to actually write the strategies. So the tool that we use to write card fraud strategies is called Defense Edge. And the reason that we really like this tool is because it's so incredibly robust, right? I mentioned the good guy doing the good transaction and stopping the bad guy from doing the bad transaction. That's a fine line, right? There's a fine line between declining folks that are trying to do good transactions because you're trying to protect against the bad. So the more finite we can be on how we identify fraud in cards, the better we can find that line. So we have over 300 different decision elements that are available to our fraud analyst as we're writing the rules. So you hear a lot in the industry about Falcon, right? And the common thread in Falcon is the Fico neural network score. So Falcon itself was actually the original name of the Fico, what we call Fico now. And so you kind of see the term Falcon in a lot of different fraud solutions in the industry. The common thread is that Fico scoring model. So what Fico brings to the table is a consortium of behavior, right? So it can look at spending and say, I know how Christine typically uses her card, and it's different than how Joe typically uses his card. Right, so when I'm scoring Christine's transactions, I'm going to score them differently than Joe because her pattern of usage is different, right? So the consortium is saying, I'm going to score you, and the more you're out of your typical pattern, the more fraud, the more potential for fraud exists. So the higher the score, the more likely it is that transaction is fraud. You see this network score used really, really heavily in the industry, and some of our competitors leverage this score almost exclusively in how they decision fraud, right? Our solution allows this to become one of over 300 different decision elements we're using to really get to that finite decision. So if we want to use Visa and MasterCard scores in combination with that FICO score, look at amounts, merchant category codes, the location of the merchant and the transaction, how far this transaction was from the transaction that happened 5 minutes ago, how many transactions have happened over an hour, minute, second, right? That's just 7 or 8 of the 300. This gives us the basis to really get to that fine line that we've been talking about.
So Kristen, if I went to Florida and I didn't tell my credit union that I was going to Florida, would you guys automatically stop me, or would it, because it knows, like, I don't know, every once in a while I go down there?
So it does learn your kind of travel behavior a little bit. It's not as black and white as if you go to Florida, I'm going to decline your transaction, right? If you're typically spending in Vermont and all of a sudden you're spending in Florida, I'm definitely increasing my fraud score, right? Which depending on how highly that kicks up may or may not mean I'm going to decline and verify with you. But when we get to that minutia, I'm also looking for when's the last time you did a transaction in Vermont compared to when it happened in Florida, right? If it was 5 minutes ago, I have a
Right,
different
there's an
level of
issue.
risk than if it was yesterday, right?
Right.
I'm looking at the kind of transaction it is as well. So it's not super black and white from that example, but so it just depends a little bit. You know, that your members of the credit unions can actually tell us that they're going to be traveling, right? You're able to, they can report it through our mobile application. The credit union can tell us that through the Quick Assist application. And that actually is taken into consideration if we have that piece of detail as well, if they have told us ahead of time. Something that's kind of exciting, and we're not quite there yet, but where we're going is we get travel tag information in on the transaction. So if your cardholder has bought their travel ticket, for example, with the credit union card, right, I can see that they're planning on that travel. So we're starting to leverage that in our decisioning as well. Longer term, what we want that to mean is if you never tell me that you're traveling, I'm going to be able to systematically move you in and out because I'll have enough detail captured from those transactions that you've purchased your travel with that you won't really need me to do that, to tell me. So that's a little bit more future facing and kind of where we're going next, but lots of flexibility there. Did I answer your question?
Oh
Kristen?
yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So we talked about the card fraud piece. You know, how do we contact your member, right? So what happens if we think fraud is occurring, right? If we do queue up because you're in Florida and we don't know if it's you, Christine, how do we confirm it, right? So we have any number of options that you can leverage. We have a host of live agent folks in our fraud call center. So folks at PSCU who are picking up the phone and calling your members if we want to use the actual kind of dial and smile kind of channel. Digital channels are huge. So interactive text messaging, interactive digital voice, email notifications if you want it, also part of what we bring to the table. The idea is for us to try to match the channel that we contact that member on with where we know they're most likely to respond, right? And so that's the idea. So for our folks who are big mobile users, you know, we know that they're active in the digital space with the credit union, you know, they're going to see a fraud text before they answer their phone, right? So let's leverage the channel they're going to look at most quickly. We have it set up in a waterfall effect, right? So we're not using one or the other. It's a combination of all of those typically is our best practice. I'm going to try to text you, and if I don't hear back from you in a certain amount of time, I might try a digital voice. And if I don't hear back, I'll try another channel. So we'll have a handful of messages that we try to reach out to in a pretty short amount of time to get through that contact to that member. Questions, concerns, or thoughts on the member interaction there?
I think the only question I have is in regards to just the mobile or the text messaging to the person. Are there certain strands of numbers you use, or does PSCU use one certain number so people can code it in their phone to know?
Yep. So we have a dedicated short code
Okay.
That's our free to end user short code. So yeah, so we have a lot of collateral that we've built around it that the association can use or the credit union themselves can use to say, hey, if it's coming from us, here's what it's going to look like.
Oh,
right?
great. Yeah,
be
just
able
knowing,
to
because you get
call
so
it
many
out.
spoofs across the board. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
If you don't mind me asking, Michelle, now that I've unmuted myself, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. So, you've looked at some of this fraud detection service and how it works and whatnot, had some discussions, and you're intimately familiar with how things work today on the platform that we're on at FIS. How do you, what are the differences that you see between the two, and good, bad, or indifferent?
Yeah, I think, in regards to Christian's previous comment, really incorporating hopefully down the road, that travel, I think that's really important in regards to buying that plane ticket or buying that bus ticket. I think we tend to get a lot of hits where, hey, the person was traveling, you can see their patterns of gas purchases currently. So with the current solution that we're on today, the Prism Omni Shield solution, which was introduced in 2014, I find a lot of that human intervention that would potentially watch some of that activity as well as computer-wise going away because they're trying to get more computer savvy and try to catch it rather than a little mixture of both. So that's really, really exciting to see as well. Overall, we have had, we're putting in exclusions currently, where before a technician would see those exclusions and watch some travel notes, which has gone away, the human intervention that really helps along the way. I'm really excited to see that come in a little bit more because they have gone so digitally. So I really excited to see that change being in effect as well.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Kristen.
Oh, interrupt any old time, Joe. Okay, so if we go back to our Anna video, at the very end, the contact center representative was making sure she was aware of some additional alerting capabilities that were available to her. So kind of moving away from confirming potential fraud and thinking about how we offer the end member the ability to be more present in kind of monitoring their own activity, right? Studies show us that members that are close and more actively watching what happens on their cards through alerts tend to see up to a 40% reduction in overall fraud exposure on their cards, right? So there's a ton of value in having your cardholder themselves being kind of part of that overall arsenal of fraud solutions, if you will. So we've actually embedded the OnDot solution, if anyone's familiar with that in the industry, the alerts and control solution through OnDot into the suite of what PSCU can bring to the table. So what that means is the member can go in and say, okay, I want to be notified via text message whenever my card gets used for all transactions. Or I want to be notified in only certain transactions. So maybe if it's only an ATM transaction, because I know those have a high level of risk, right? Or maybe only a gas station transaction, because I know those have a high level of risk. Or maybe only a transaction over a certain dollar amount. Or maybe only if my card is used in a certain location and my phone is not in that same geographical location. Or maybe I've defined the 2 or 3 areas where I typically use my card and it's being used outside of those areas. So just tell me, right? Send me a text message as soon as that transaction occurs based on how I've told you to send me messaging. In my own personal life, I just say any transaction, notify me, right? But as soon as I see that text come through, if I haven't done it, I'm looking online, I'm picking up the phone, I'm trying to figure out if something's going on with my card. The control side of that is very similar, except it gives the member the ability to say, don't only notify me, but I want you to actually decline this transaction on my behalf if it meets those criteria. So for example, your member could say, if it's over a certain dollar amount, I want it to be declined. If it's outside of those geo regions that I've defined on the app, I want you to decline it, right? So it just gives you the ability to offer your member this full suite of alerts and control solution that kind of complement this idea of that historic kind of confirmed fraud communication. So it's definitely part of our arsenal of solutions that we bring to the table.
Kristen, this sort of, for everybody's benefit, sort of sits above the fraud solution. So if the fraud department were to block the card, you just can't come in this solution without replying to the alert and just unblock your card without saying anything, correct? It sort of overlies it, right?
Right. There's a series of hierarchy of how
Yes.
it all works together. And then you can tell if the decline was because it was a rule from a member versus the credit union fraud rule, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You can tell, the member can tell that, the credit union staff can tell that.
Just for security reasons, yeah. I just want to make sure that they can't just unblock that without actually replying to the alert.
Correct. So if we think about the fraud process overall, and I think it's worthwhile that we do, when we think about card fraud, so everything we've talked about with rules that protect the card as it's being used from fraud, right? How we confirm if the fraud's actually occurring. We really are looking at this section right here, the fraud run section. What's really interesting in my mind is I think about the very best written fraud, transactional fraud rule, stops fraud the very first time it occurs, right? I'm identifying it the first time. Well, we've spent a lot of time over the last 5 or 6 years doing at PSCU is saying, how do I make it so that's not the only solution we have around fraud, right? How do we think of this bigger picture of fraud and say, there's a lot that happens before a fraudster is running a fraud transaction, right? How do we identify that things are happening ahead of time so that we can predict that fraud's about to happen, not just stop it as it's happening? So we have a layer of solutions that we've added in from that point of view. So how do we predict that fraud is going to occur? We have built a solution called linked analysis, right? So if you've heard the terms machine learning, artificial intelligence, this is PSCU's homegrown linked analysis tool. And the value it brings to our credit unions is really in the name. I'm linking analytics that just didn't typically talk to each other, right? If I think about how kind of the industry historically has written those card fraud rules, I'm looking at card fraud trends, right? What has been confirmed fraud? What has been compromised? And we're writing rules on that card-based data. With linked analysis, we're pulling in things like call center data that PSCU sees, IVR trending data, online and mobile sign-on information, dark web data, as well as that card data. It's about 30 different data sources that we pull together today so that we have a much broader look at what's happening. So think of this scenario as a way to maybe kind of wrap your head about what the heck I'm trying to say. So pretend I'm a naughty fraudster, right? And I've just gone online on the dark web and I bought data from a data breach. Okay, so I have this data and now I need to see if it's usable, right? So that I can try to go do account takeover and commit fraud. So I am pretty advanced technologically and I've written a bot, right? So now my bot is going to call into the financial institution IVR. And I'm going to, through that IVR, just check what's going on with the card, right? Is there a nice balance behind that debit card in the checking account, right? Is the card in an open status? Okay. Well, with linked analysis, I'm looking for those trends. A bot is going to run through IVR prompts super fast, right? Where someone who's calling in is going to be listening to the prompts, right? And pushing through them. So it acts differently than a live agent, a live person coming through the IVR, okay? So the system will flag that, said this one is moving through the IVR a little weird. And then we'll start looking. Have we seen that same phone number across any number of financial institution also calling into PSCU's IVR and acting the same way, right? So I may see that I have that same phone number that's called in across 5 different financial institutions, all moving through that IVR really quickly. The system has identified a potential for fraud, and then that gets pushed out to our fraud calling group, right? So our fraud calling group is now picking up the phone and saying, did you just call into your credit union's IVR? You know, when I start getting no's, that tells me that that's a true fraud scenario. So now I'm blocking and reissuing those cards. I'm letting you know that that's a bad Annie, right? And we've protected that member and the credit union from fraud before card fraud ever happens. Okay. So linked analysis becomes a very big tool for PSCU to feed into how well we write our fraud rules around card, but also help us predict that fraud is about to occur. What do you think?
I think that's amazing. I mean, the way technology is today for these fraudsters, you know, they're trying anything and everything. And, you know, you guys are really stopping it before it actually starts, which is really awesome.
And I think that's always the challenge of, you know, yes, we need to stay with them, but how to try to jump a little bit ahead of them, which is great to see. And I think you mentioned, Kristen, before that those potential numbers are available to credit unions if they would like the list.
Yeah, so if we identify a bad Annie, right? So if it's a call center kind of based identification, we say anything coming in from this number is a fraudster. We actually publish those Annie lists out onto our web portal on a weekly basis so that you can consume those at the credit union level as well. You know, Michelle and Christine, when we were kind of prepping for our conversation today, we were talking about how interesting it is on, you know, how you can look at fraud from a credit union point of view. And then, you know, just at the association level, how different that can look when you're looking at it across, you know, 10 or 12 different credit unions. You know, think of linked analysis as a really blown up version of that, right? It's looking at all of these different data sources for over 1,500 different credit unions. And it just gives us a really proprietary, unique view of what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's the, you know, even with us, it's amazing how many times I've picked up the phone and called our fraud department saying, you know, I really see something going on here. And it was actually one of the local splash on the water in Burlington. We're like, something's not right here. You know, things are getting hit from this location. But yeah, even looking at it 10, I can't imagine having, you know, triple to quadruple that. Yeah.
Now, you're starting to hear about this elsewhere in the industry. We've had this in production for about 5 years. We're starting to see some of our competitors come to market. It's kind of a pitch for the PSCU solution a little bit there. What we're seeing in our competitors is they're pretty single threaded, right? So they might be focused more on shared branching or one specific component of kind of the solution that the processor brings to the table. We're not seeing that they've really caught up to kind of the robustness that PSC is able to offer right now.
Thank you.
So I was going to ask you, Kristen, you know, what we hear over the years and observe, and it's not specific to, you know, Vermont credit unions or anything, but, you know, fraud on credit and debit programs certainly is huge for card issuers. And has been more huge sometimes in the past and whatnot. You know, not a week, maybe sometimes not a day goes by where you're not getting notifications of, you know, some kind of card compromises and whatnot. So I guess, you know, I have to ask, I know PSCU invests a lot of money into all of these fraud detection and prevention systems and to the human resource and whatnot. Why, and it's not inexpensive to do that. So why do all EFT processors why are they not all doing the same kind of thing? Is it just a dollars and cents kind of consideration, or is there truly a belief that no, this system, even though it's a lot more narrowly focused, is, you know, tried and true and it's what we've always done kind of thing and whatnot?
Yeah, I think if you're out there talking to, processors that compete with PSCU, so to speak, you're going to hear versions on a theme of this. What I would say is that a lot of kind of these add-on solutions, these predictive solutions that we're further down the path. And I have to tell you, I think there's two big things that lead to that. One is we're one of the only organizations out there that's truly focused on just the issuer's payment space, right? So that means we can really target how we invest, right? We don't own a network, we don't own a core, right? So our investments are really, really specific to the issuer payment space, right? Some of our other competitors have a lot more that comes to play with what they own, which means how they invest, it just looks different, right, than how PSCU invests. I think we've also been lucky enough, or I want to say lucky kind of by design, to have really thought ahead around what does it mean to grow PSCU's business and to grow our revenues so that we continue to have more money to invest in. What we're hearing from our board is really important, right? And fraud has certainly been one of those themes. I think those two big things, kind of our financial well-being, as well as the fact that we're really focused on the issuer payment space, has just led us to be a little bit more ahead of the curve on some of these really kind of niche types of solutions that we're talking about today.
Cool. Thanks for that.
And Joe, I'd like to add one more thing. It's just that it's our DNA as a cooperative, an organization that was founded, owned, and governed by credit unions. It is in our interest and, to build something that's going to help credit unions compete and prosper in the marketplace. The way we look at it, contrary to publicly traded companies, when we build something and invest in something, it is for the well-being of our credit unions. So
Right.
if the credit union succeeds, we do succeed. It's a common vision, shared vision. That's how we've always been since day one. So this is just one example, but everything that you see in front of you is, is for the one purpose and one purpose only, is for credit unions to be able to survive, protect their assets, as well as and grow. And that's how we view it as an organization.
Thanks. And one more thing, Kristen, that just came to mind. So does everything that we're seeing and hearing from you on this here today also apply equally to the credit card side?
It does. It does. We actually tend to have a little bit more rich data on the credit card side just because we see a little bit more of that fuller picture.
Yeah.
Full picture, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I would kind of natively see your payments and Balcon types of data points in addition to your card and call center pieces. So absolutely. Short answer there is yes.
Thanks.
Back to your other comment, Joe, you're going to see us continue in that space, right? So right now, we're kind of looking at how, is there an opportunity for us to take this level of what we do really well, which from a fraud point of view is one of those, and apply it to other places in the market, right? So think about the Zells and the kind of P2P platforms of the world that are really exciting, but really risky from a fraud point of view. We're looking at, do we have a way of taking what we've built and kind of partnering with those P2P networks to really find that kind of value added services between the two that we know that our issuer partners really want. So there's things like that we're kind of under proof, or looking at proofs of concept right now that could be really exciting as we move forward too.
So a little bit off to the side kind of issue, but prompted by what you just said, not fraud specific, but you remind me, are you hearing or seeing a lot more interest from your client credit unions, be they, well, debit mostly, I guess, in those kinds of P2P kinds of services that you're talking about, like Zelle and Venmo and so on and so forth?
100%. 100%. The thought always is, how do you get your card to have market share in where the payment space is going, right? And that ability to move money from person to person, to collect money because all of my team lives in 5 different states and we want to buy someone, a gift because they have a baby, right? Or I'm collecting money because I was in charge of concessions for my kids' school thing the other weekend. People don't want to donate, but they want to send me money. Venmo, Zells of the world make that very easy from a consumer point of view. But I'm not thinking about what cards attached to it, right? I'm just thinking that it's easy for me to use. So we want our consumers to be thinking about that, or make it so that when they do leverage those, our card and our credit union relationship, it just comes hand in hand with it. So it's very much something that we're seeing increased interest in.
It's, and sorry to get sidetracked with this, it's kind of a new world a little bit in credit union land because, we've had, I think, every credit union that we've spoken to, has asked something about adding those kinds of programs and whatnot, and rightfully so. But I have to tell you, just as a test, a while back, so I'm a member, as many of us in the industry are members of multiple credit unions, and have various credit and debit cards from each and everything. And so I started a Venmo account some time back and tried adding, all the cards that I had to see how difficult or easy it was. And I have to say that when I say it's a new world for credit unions, what I'm relating that to is that it was a lot more challenging from a consumer perspective to add most of the credit union cards into that Venmo account than it was a bank issued card, a large bank issued card. And so, yes, I admit it. You just heard it. I have a bank issued card for comparison purposes. And I could only assume that it was because credit unions are new to this area, doing less of it, more conservative in, what they will and won't allow and all of that.
I would guess that your bank is probably a large bank versus a community
The
bank.
one, this one card is from, yes, right.
Yeah.
Right.
What we've kind of seen early in the kind of P2P world is that the cost of Zelle was really prohibitive for smaller financial institutions. So you definitely saw some of the big guys integrate that in a different way, which I think is what you're seeing, within that. So, we're really looking forward to kind of the real-time payments pieces that are the right-time payments that are coming through the Fed, what Visa and MasterCard have brought to market, because when we think of kind of trying to make the space even from that point of view and not make it that you have to have a really deep pockets to leverage those kinds of solutions as best as possible, we think that's going to help level the playing field. So
Thanks.
it'll be interesting to see.
We also had, and this will be a little bit more on target, we also had some credit unions ask us about business cards and our new relationship with PSCU. And, yes, it's doable and so on and so forth. But when it comes to all of this fraud detection and whatnot, I assume all of this in the mobile app works the same way for business related cards as it does for the regular, I'll call it consumer cards.
That is correct. That is correct.
Same fraud
And
detection and everything.
Yeah, because we're definitely seeing a spike in the credit union space on wanting to grow kind of those business relationships across the industry as well. But yes, you're accurate. All right. Good conversation.
Any questions from the credit union?
Looks like we're good.
Okay. So kind of wrapping up our theme of predicting when fraud is about to happen, call center channel fraud just has been skyrocketing, right? EMV has been doing its job. It's been designed to help limit fraud. Well, fraudsters are smart and they just find the least protected channel, right? So it's always shifting and moving. Call center account takeover has seen spikes because of that. So when we thought about how we continue to add these predictive or early detection solutions, the contact center was a big focus for us a couple of years ago. So we estimate that about 1 in every 400 calls that comes into any card contact center is a fraudster up to something nefarious. So we've actually purchased some software from a company called Pindrop. And anytime someone calls into a PSCU managed call center, they are getting what we call a phone print from PinDrop. So what that means is we're creating a risk score, not at all related to cards, but specific to the nature and the sound of the call itself. There's about 1,300 different factors that are used to identify it. And then the higher the score, the more likely it is that the person calling in is not who they say they are, right? So think about account takeover kinds of steps that happen early before card fraud might be occurring. So when we ran our proof of concept on this with this software 4 years ago, we stopped $1 million in fraud in that first month of using it. So needless to say, we bought it and it is now in place in all of our PSCU call centers. So to try to kind of walk you through what I'm trying to say a little bit more clearly here. So this is Bill. Bill has lost his card, right? He calls into his credit union to report it lost or stolen. Well, in this case, that could be a PSCU call center. We have the ability to act as an extension of your credit union, at any time, maybe after hours, maybe only for certain types of calls. You're really defining that. But between the time that he dialed the phone number and a live agent picked up, the PinDrop system has created a biometric score, right? So it's looking at all of these different factors. How did that call route? What wireless carrier was used? What's the call quality? What's the background noise? So it's creating a call score, and that score dictates how the contact center rep is prompted to interact with that member. So in this case, it's green, it's good. We are confident that this person is who they say they are. It's a low risk score. So we're going to move on from any other, deep dive authentication processes and really just move on to helping the member resolve their ask, right? Taking that lost stolen report and getting a new card in process and out to that member. Now let's say this naughty fraudster has gotten a hold of Bill's data and he's now calling in pretending to be Bill, right? The same process occurs. So he enters the phone number. Before the call gets to the contact center rep, we've gone through that same phone printing biometric process. So when I look at the ANI, how it routed, the wireless call carrier, the call quality, the background noise, it's now considerably different than what I saw call in from Bill, right? This prompts a really high risk score, right? This is a different guy. This is a fraud, someone we think attempting some kind of fraud. So now how I handle him as a member is very different for that contact center, and that score will prompt the process, right? So I may take all of that member's information, but not take any action until I end the call, pick it up, and then make other calls to confirm if that person actually just called in to ask for those actions. Okay, so I might handle it very differently if it's a high risk. So again, protecting kind of these channels that we know are going to be targeted for fraud types of actions before card fraud ever occurs. Okay. So if we go back to our fraud process visual here, right, we've talked about how we predict and stop fraud before a card is ever used through our linked analysis, through the call center pieces. We've talked about how we protect the card as it's being used, right, with fraud rules and ways we interact with the member. Now we're going to wrap up with how do we help you recover, right, when fraud does occur. Okay. So we support a full back office solution around disputes and recovery. So whether that's a non-fraud dispute or a full end-to-end fraud recovery, we can help with as much of that as you want us to. So that can look like a PSCU staff person actually taking the initial call from your member and our back office doing the back office heavy lifting, or it could be you just leverage us at whatever point in that process you want to, right? So you're really defining how much of us you use in that process, but we have that back office solution built into what we can offer you. Now, in addition to that, we've kind of talked about how fraud ebbs and flows. Card not present, I'm going to guess you guys have seen some spikes, right? Especially in volumes of disputes, volumes of write-offs. right? Card not present being targeted because EMV is protecting the card present channel.
Yeah, and that Venmo and everything, it's been crazy.
Yes.
Bad. Yeah.
So we've actually created a relationship with a card not present consortium group. It's called Ithaca. And so they pull together thousands of different merchants, card not present merchants. And so when we confirm fraud, whether it's you or myself that does it, we're actually going to send that confirmed fraud through the consortium. So if the card not present merchant has something waiting to ship and we've confirmed fraud, they're going to stop the shipment from going out, okay, if it hasn't shipped yet. The bigger win that we found from the card not present consortium is these low dollar types of transactions. So think about your iTunes and your Xboxes, right? That, you know, it's dollars and cents, and it's going to cost you more to try to dispute it, right? If you have rights to do it, than it would be just to write it off. So what we're doing is we're sending even those small dollar transactions through Ithaca. And what we're seeing is that these card not present merchants have a relatively low interchange rate that they pay on their transactions, and they want to protect that, right? They don't want to pay more. So they're doing what we think of as goodwill write-offs. So they're returning a lot of the money just through this relationship. So without going through a dispute, we're able to often recover some of those card not present small dollar amounts for that and help make the credit union whole. So last year we recovered, this number's from 2 years ago. 2 years ago was 4 million. This year was right around 6 million that we recovered within that for our credit unions. While we're on the topic of card not present, we also support 3D Secure. So 3D Secure, that additional layer of solution that Visa and MasterCard have mandated, that is when you're shopping online, right? Some extra layers of protection to make sure when you're shopping online that fraud's not occurring, okay? So what that means is when you're shopping online, if the merchant participates in 3D Secure, we're actually doing the verification behind the scenes to make sure that the merchant and the member are true.
Still, because it's still not mandated for merchants. I know it's mandated for
Issuers.
issuers, but it's still not merchant, which I think, you know, if you're going to have a win-win type of situation or solution, it should honestly be both sides. If you want to be a card not present merchant acquirer, I really think they should give a little push that way too. It just protects both sides for sure.
I have
You just
heard
have more data.
I've heard that we're expecting some kind of rule shift in the next couple of years around this. So I don't know
sure
if
it's hard, yeah.
if it's a requirement or a kind of a liability shift, but I have heard some rumors that the associations are looking in that direction. So yes, I'm with you. I would love to see that.
I think it would have, you know, I don't think it would have taken so long to be introduced. I mean, I think it is better now. I think it still can get better, for sure. But
and it's better because the member doesn't need to take any other step to enroll themselves.
Right. Yeah. With MasterCard Secure Code going out to the website and doing, it was, definitely a pain to go that route. With it now being a one-time password, it's made it much, much better for sure. Still can have some improvement if you get some more merchants on for sure.
100%. So we're supporting that one-time password, the 2.0 version. It's all in place across credit, across debit with PSCU today. Okay, so if we get back to our lovely visual, now I've just dropped in PSCU solutions across the bottom, right? So again, it's been really important for us to think very much about how we cover the full gamut, that 360-degree view of fraud from our payments point of view. And we've just walked through all of the solutions that we have today, right, that do that. And we've mentioned a couple of times some additional investments that you would expect to see from us going forward. So I am always a big fan of the stats, right? So if I have any stat people on the phone, here you go. There you go, Christine's waving her hand. But last year we stopped through our card fraud rules, $277 million in fraud. Okay, so that's your card fraud rules. Then we think about what we've layered in there in that predictive component. So down at the bottom here, linked analysis stopped an additional almost $40 million in fraud. The call center fraud scoring stopped an additional 22 million. And then we recovered a total of about 77 million in our back office last year. So if I take that together, it's about 400 million, right, protected or recovered, saved from a fraud point of view. Right, that's a really nice financial benefit that shows kind of the value that the PSCU solutions bring. And while that 400 million is impressive, this is probably my most favorite stat. It's kind of little down at the bottom here. We've talked about most of these layers. There's actually a few that we haven't talked about, like what we can do on the reward side, but all of these layers get us to a point where we're still approving 99.8% of all of the transactions that your members are attempting, right? We know that some of our peers in the industry kind of do a promised fraud loss ratio in their proposals. And we thought about that in the past and really have decided against it, because this stat, right, that balance between stopping the bad guy and letting the good guy do a good transaction became more important for us, right? We didn't want to manage to a specific fraud loss ratio. We wanted to maximize what we could stop, and that as well as maximizing that member experience. So this to us,
I think that's the biggest balance, trying to keep that balance across the board, for sure. With our change in 2014 to the OmniShield SaaS model, it's a struggle. It's really, really hard, and you're always changing rules rather than having the challenges of just that false positive ratio being just always looked at and continuing to be.
I can get your fraud losses really, really low if you don't mind me declining 5% of your card transactions, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah, it's hard. Yeah,
it's a payoff.
we have more upset members than not, and it's a balancing challenge for sure. And you just got to find that right balance and trying to bring in other aspects, because you just can't keep hitting these transactions for no reason when they did it 2 months ago and you're not truly following their history.
Yep.
So I'm distanced from this, Kristen. So something you just said, and you just referenced it again about, a processor guaranteeing that your fraud won't exceed a certain threshold, or your transactions approved won't go below a certain threshold or something. How do processors of any sort do that? Or is it just because what they're quoting is a really high or low, whichever way you look at it, number that they know they're not going to get to?
It's focusing on one of those numbers is how they do it, right? They're really focused on that fraud loss number that they're guaranteeing. And typically we don't see them committing to what that means from a member experience point of view, right? And as kind of an organization that's been focused on credit unions, we've looked at that model a couple of times, right? And we just haven't been able to pull the trigger to say, if we focus more on one than on the full picture, we think we're sacrificing the full picture for the one metric. And that wasn't really how we decided we wanted to bring our fraud solutions to market. So, they're able to do that because they're focusing and committing contractually to a single metric, and then they're in control of managing the metrics holistically.
That one metric, right?
Yeah.
One other quick sidebar kind of question, and that's that you mentioned, and I forget what it was specific to, but you mentioned something relative to EMV cards, and that made me wonder. We've had some credit unions ask about contactless cards, and relatively new in credit union land. So the incidence of fraud related to contactless cards, when credit unions in Vermont anyways first started introducing EMV cards, and we all remember reading the headlines that it's going to curb fraud and so on and so forth, and it just shifted. Contactless cards, same story, higher instance of fraud, less, not enough history to see any patterns yet.
So we've been issuing contactless cards. Gosh, Medi, what do you think, for 3 years, 4 years?
The what? I'm sorry, Kristen?
Contactless cards. Do you think we've been alive on the street for about 3 years? Does that sound about right?
Yes. Yeah, about 3 years. Correct.
And you're right, we're seeing kind of a more holistic move in the last 6 months to a year of credit unions wanting to, either get there now or schedule it out, right, to kind of have it be in their plans. And we're definitely seeing an uptick in movement to contactless cards in the industry. We haven't seen much of a shift from a card point of view as it relates to fraud with contactless.
Mhm.
Contactless in my mind is more of a convenience, right? And a way to kind of baby step into how do I get away from having to have an actual plastic in my hand to use my card versus a big kind of EMV shift, right? So the EMV component really kind of set the stage for the card present fraud protections, and contactless is kind of piggybacking on that to then think about how do we offer kind of digital alternatives to a true plastic to members to get there. So not a big shift from a fraud point of view, hand in hand with contactless.
Thank you.
Mhm. So what do you guys think? That was all of my prepared goodies. What questions do you have?
Yeah, I think that it's great how much money you have saved the credit unions and the members over time, because, I know when I go shopping or I go out of town, I don't want to be stopped when I'm doing my purchase. And so that's a big, plus. And I also like how, you're always in tuned as to where the card should be, and saving, the money for the fraud, eliminating the fraudster quite a bit.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. What other questions do you guys have, or what other topics do you want to try to tackle while we have time together?
In regards to any reporting tools, I'm going to be guessing a lot of this information goes back to different strategies on reports that you might be able to retrieve in the performance view systems and all the different products you guys offer.
100%. So just for folks that maybe don't know the terms that Michelle is using, we have a reporting and analytics module that's web-based. And so that includes turnkey kind of system generated reports. It also includes reporting for all of the solutions that PSCU brings to the table. So the credit unions as well as the association will have access to that reporting, depending on how you roll that out. But that will give you all of the details on how we're detecting fraud, how we're recovering fraud, how fraud is trending for your specific credit union, how fraud is trending in the industry, what are your specific metrics around false positives and fraud recovery and approval ratios. You get an entire suite of pretty much everything that's happening around fraud for your specific credit union from that portal.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Kristen. We really appreciate your information. It was very, very informative for our credit unions. And this is recorded, so we will be sending it out to people. And we appreciate your time.
Good. I think I made it through with no naughty words.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And thanks to everyone who got on the line with us this afternoon. And like Christine said, we will be farming this out to everyone, because I think, I'm probably the most distance of anyone on the line here from this whole fraud area, but I found it real informative. And I agree with you, Christine. The statistics on, dollars of loss avoided and whatnot, or recovered and whatnot, are really impressive. It's evident how much investment that PSCU makes into fraud controls. So this is awesome. Thank you.
And thank you so much. And we're so excited to start our new partnership and be able to have some more access to other tools, reporting and other things to just better credit unions going forward.
Right.
Thank you, you guys. wishing the sun shining on you here soon.
Yeah, it's raining now.
Thanks for sharing. It's not working yet, but keep
I know. I'll try harder.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Bye.
Thank you, Medi. Bye.
Thank you so much.